We ended last time with the idea of the vessels coming before the light.
Which page is we on?
192.
Yeah.
That was his explanation for Lo Ama Aretz Chasid, which in other words means that he can't bring down the light of Chesed, which is the light of the infinite that Avram brought down. And you can't do it without Torah and mitzvos. So in general, a Ama Aretz can't bring it down, but with Torah and mitzvos he can. So that's the added benefit of receiving the Torah, that now everybody could be like Avraham. Avram could be that way because he had a special gift to know how to bring down the light of the infinite, but not everybody does. And the way that everybody can is by performing mitzvahs. V'zeu right, we're 7 lines from the bottom of the first paragraph on the left side. ובזה יובן שלפעמים מצינו שנחשב מעלת אברהם גדולה שקיים את כל התורה, וכמו שכתוב וישמור משמרתי. In general, Avram's called the האדם הגדול בענקים. Right? He's the greatest of the giants. That's how Yechezkel describes him. Or Yirmiyahu, I don't remember who describes him this way. And Gedula in general is the name of Chesed. So sometimes we find that Avram's stature is the greatest, also a pun for, or double meaning with that was the early name before the Arizal came or before the Ramah came. Hey, Gedula was a synonym for Chesed. In fact, in early Kabbalistic works, in the Eitz Chaim of the Sfirot, you find Gedula instead of Chesed. It says Gedula. So why is it that way? So the simple reason, or at least what you learn from it, is that in order to make somebody grow, Gedula is also from to grow. Careful with the Avi.
What?
There's one here. Oh, okay. Be careful with the power.
Should always be careful with power. Absolute power corrupts.
I think just power corrupts.
And just power can be tripped over.
Absolute power you can trip over. So, ligdol means to grow, right? Legadel. So what's usually brought in Chassidus about this is that water makes things grow, and water is chesed. That's one of the connections. But then you can take this a little bit deeper, and you can say that if you want to grow somebody, you have to give them love, because the inner aspect of chesed is ahava. So Gedula is the result of ahava. That's one of the things that comes out of this early identification of chesed as Gedula. But again, it comes out from Avram being called Adam HaGadol Ba'anakim. Shekiyem et kol Torah. So on the one hand, he's considered to be the greatest because he performed the entire Torah. He was able to bring down the infinite light. Ukmo shekatuv vayishmor mishmarti. And it says about the pasuk that he kept the Torah. V'lefamim matzinu shenachshav lo legeron shelo zacha laTorah. On the other hand, sometimes it's considered to be a deficit that he didn't receive Torah, that he only did the commandments or did what he did from his own understanding. So which is it?
Choice, they didn't give him
But is it to his detriment or not? I mean, you could think that, wow, he's so great because without even being given Torah, he performed the Torah. And you could say, on the other hand, that the very fact that he wasn't commanded takes away from the value of what he did. Because the commandment in and of itself is the power given by the Almighty for the person to connect to Him. Okay? That when I command somebody, then it creates a bond between me and them. And it's a very deep thing, by the way. All of religion is based on commandments, and psychologically, it's probably the thing that bonds people together the most. They don't like it, because people don't like to be told what to do. But if you have somebody that you want to be connected to, So the strongest possible connection, let's say there's a Rav, let's say a Chassid's relationship with the Rebbe. So the Rebbe tells him to do something, he's beside himself with joy. Because there's no greater bond in the end. And one could say that the fact that in halacha the man is required, he's commanded to do 3 things for his wife, plus a few more that we sign in the ketubah. But the basis is 3 things. And then the woman, halachically in the Torah, she's not commanded to do anything. But the sages added 10 things. They have 10 different things she's commanded to do. So people fear this, but for there to be a real bond, then married couples shouldn't be afraid of telling each other what to do. Not because they have to, but because when I tell somebody to do something and they do it, that submission to the other person creates the deepest bond in the end. And so if the people want to be together anyway, you take somebody from the street and you tell them do so and so and you force them like a servant. But if you've decided to be together anyway and you tell somebody and you share what you need and you tell them, I need you to do so and so. So this is also it's a very good sign for how good the marriage is going to be beforehand even. That even when they're not married, if one asks the other to do something and they see how they feel about it, if I feel that this is taking away from my personality, from my freedom, from whatever, there's probably not enough love to begin with. But when there is enough love, so doing something for somebody else because you're commanded to do so is, by them even, is the greatest, is the deepest type of bond that can be created. So again, the example is the chassid doing something and being beside himself that he was asked to do something, because that shows shayachut, shows that you belong somewhere, that this is your place. Because it's very intimate to tell somebody do this or do that. You don't do that to somebody on the street. Okay. They're both true. It was both a benefit and a deficit. כי מצד שורש נשמתו היה הגביה למעלה עד שהייתה נשמתו מרכבה ובחינת כלי לאור התורה ואור אינסוף ברוך הוא הנמשך ומתלבש בתורה. כי אברהם עבר מה עבר וכלי. So from his soul root, he was indeed the highest, and his soul was a chariot for the infinite light. And we said that was his soul root, Eivar Ma. He's able to be a vessel of nullification, Eivar Ma. And so because of that he could draw down the infinite light. אבל כל המצוות עצמן שהן הדרגות העליונות יותר מלפני מלוך, עדיין לא ניתנו בימי אברהם. But to be able to integrate the lights of the world of chaos, which is what the mitzvos can do, that's what he explained yesterday, that the ability of receiving a vessel from Hashem, not the vessel that I naturally have, but receiving the vessel of the mitzvah is in order to integrate the light from the world of chaos that he couldn't do. That also explains why Ishmael and Esav were not integratable at that time into Yiddishkeit, because they both represent lights from that world that shattered. So if Esav would have been born after Matan Torah, it would have been a different situation. So who is Esav after Matan Torah? That's David, King David. That he's already a rectified version of Esav. They say there's both things about him. That he was both Admoni, but he had beautiful eyes. The beautiful eyes stands for the rectified lights of the eyes. which is what the world of chaos was made out of, the lights of the eyes of Adam Kadmon. But he also, in practice, he spilled a lot of blood. So he still was doing it in the service, as it were, of the Jewish people. But it was enough for Hashem to tell him that you won't build the Beis HaMikdash. So on the one hand, so it's sort of like a Ratzov Shov in Avram himself. That on the one hand, he's very connected to Hashem. He's able to bring down the infinite light, but he's not able to bring down the infinite lights of chaos. And that he's not able to contain in himself. So in that sense, it's a detriment for him that he didn't receive the mitzvahs. But from this you see that the mitzvahs are really in order to contain the world of Tov. And that's what they're for. Okay. And that's exactly why it says that they should bring the mimer that we learned a week ago, levush malchut, a royal garment, v'sus asher rachav alav hamelech v'ilbishu et ha'ish v'inyan. So why do we need the garment that was worn by the king and the horse that was ridden by the king, and all this should be worn by the man whom the melech hafetz bikoro, that the king favors. והעניין כי הנה לבוש מלכות היינו בחינת תורה ומצוות, כמו שכתוב יותר אור כשלמה ואינו אלא תורה דאורייתא וחוכמה נפקת. So the whole idea here is that this act of giving Mordechai these royal garments to wear, the man whom the king favors, was exactly a symbol for the giving of the Torah and the mitzvos. As it says that the Torah is a garment, and the Torah is the Ol is the Torah, and it's worn as a garment when there are mitzvos. דאורייתא מחוכמה נפקת, והוא בחינת לבוש לאור אין סוף ברוך הוא, מתלבש בתוכה מתוחקים וכו'. Because the Torah emerges from this infinite light. Okay. When it says דאורייתא מחוכמה נפקת, we're talking about the nigla of the Torah. That the nigla of the Torah came out of wisdom. That's exactly what we said before, that Avram is a varma, that he himself knows how to nullify in order to create himself, to turn himself into a chariot for the infinite light. For us, that's done through the mitzvos. והמצוות נקראים לבושים שבהם מלובש חסד רוע ימינה. And so the mitzvos that we do, the commandments that we do, they're like the full royal garments that contain chesed in the right hand and so on. They're all levush, they're all a garment for the infinite light. והמשכת בחינת לבוש זה שיהיה התלבשות אור אין סוף, כן, בתורה ומצוות ובמעשה המצוות וגמר בפועל ממש, הוא על ידי בחינת סוס. And why do you need to ride a horse? What's the horse good for? So he says that the horse is the conduit. It's the medium through which the Torah emerges from the infinite wisdom. And where do we see that? We see that when Hashem came to give the Torah, it says, כמו שכתוב גבי מתן תורה, כי תרכב על סוסיך מרכבותיך ישועה. That you rode on your horses. What are the horses? The horses are the letters. And that's the usual explanation. That the horses are the letters of the Torah. What do we mean by the letters of the Torah? Like we said, that Hashem was able to contain himself within the letters of Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzaticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim Bet Avadim. That he concentrates himself. It's as if he's giving you a chariot on which his light is riding. Those are the letters of the Torah. Here he gives a little bit of a different direction, but it's the same idea. ובאור עניין זה כי הנה סוס הוא בגימטריה בית פעמים גס. That horse is 126. It's 2 times 63. והיינו בחינת כי גאו גאס. To be gross really is the word. Not gross as in disgusting, but gross as in grub, like somebody who's gas ruach. דהיינו להיות על זה בבחינת ביטול אליו יתברך. The idea is that you feel that Hashem is very strongly upon you. So the susim, why do they draw the chariot? Because they give the sense that that's their nature, to be nullified to the chariot, to be nullified to the rider. Again, it's really talking about the letters. But one way of understanding the letters is that the letters are batal, they're nullified relative to the rider, which is not the way it is with the letters of creation. The letters of creation are not nullified to the rider. And they do what the rider says, but they're not nullified. Because of that, they conceal the rider. They conceal the chariot behind it. The letters of creation are such that creation hides Hashem, doesn't show Hashem. But the letters of the Torah, they draw Hashem. All you feel in the end is the rider, is who's on these letters.
The same letters.
Why is it
The
same
font's
letters?
different.
No,
Different fonts.
it's the same letters. If they're used in a different sequence, different order, but it's the same letters, different letters. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and Dalet.
So try to answer your own question.
The way you arrange them.
You're right. You say Bereshis is written with the same Aleph bit that Anochi is written with.
Or the translation of Mein Kampf. I mean, it's the same letters.
That's in German letters.
If you translate
No, if you translate it into Hebrew, you still use the same letters. So that might be that the content is different. Could there be something more? Can you think of anything else that?
No, there weren't specific letters only used for creation. There weren't specific letters only used for giving the Torah.
So you should know first of all that there's one of the early in the end I guess you would call him a Kabbalist, but he's not. He's a very interesting character, the Rokeach. It's called the Rokeach. He's a pharmacist.
It's the grandfather of the building.
Okay, of who?
Who's the grandfather of the building?
No, I don't think.
No. He's from the 12th century. He's one of the Rishonim, the 13th century.
It's Kabbalistish.
Okay, he's very complex. He's a very complex character. So in one of his works tries to work this out. So how are they different? It's the same letters. So it's interesting. He has a very interesting answer. He says, if you look closely, you'll see it's based a little bit on the Gemara, but not fully. The Gemara doesn't say it explicitly. He says if you look throughout all of Ma'aseh Bereshis, the whole description of creation, you'll see that there's only 21 letters used. And which letter isn't used? There's one letter that's not used in the whole description of creation, the Samech, which is very strange, because you would think that the Samech would be, what does Samech indicate? Nature. It's cyclical. You would think that's. And then he says, if you look in the first Luchos, in the first 10 Commandments, not the ones in Vayet Chanan, but the ones in Bereshis, and the Shmos, so what do you see? You see that there's also one letter missing.
Which is?
Tet. Tet. In the second Luchos, it says, Lemani Tavlach. It says, so that, and in Kabedet Avicha Ve'etimecha, it gives the reward. And it says, Lemani Tavlach. So there is a Tet. But the first time, there's no Tet. So he says you can create the world without a samech, and you can give the Torah without a tet. What's the explanation? So he says the explanation is that really, if the samech would have been included in creation, then there would have been no way for Avram or for anybody else to reveal Hashem in nature. It would have remained completely concealed. Meaning, you would have kept going round and round and round and round and never come to anything. Meaning, creation would be 100% cyclical. And what breaks it, the fact, today they would call it like breaking symmetry, but what makes it possible to realize that Hashem, like Avram did, that you realize that Hashem this is that it's not perfectly round. We talked about this once.
Global warming is a good thing.
Yeah, all these things. The fact that nature is not, if nature was 100% like a machine, there wouldn't be any possibility of finding Hashem in it. What about the Tet? So he says about the Tet that the Tet is a symbol for the snake. That if the serpent would have been, the snake, the Yetzer Hara would have been included, Lemani Tavlach is like the end all. in a world that's shekulot tov, it's like the world to come. He says if that would have been included in the 10 Commandments when Hashem gave them, that would have been the end of all avodah, because we would be at the end already. So Hashem didn't include the tet, meaning He didn't sweeten the serpent, He didn't sweeten the Yetzer Hara within the 10 Commandments themselves the first time, because if He would have, that would have precluded any type of service of God afterwards. Everything would have been rectified forever, and that's it. So what do you learn from this?
So then why did Moshe do it in the second time?
Moshe already, it's human-made rectification. When you connect to Moshe, so you can do it, but it's still part of avodah. It's like, I think we learned about this maybe once, that what's the middle letter of the entire Chumash? From Bereshis all the way to Al Kol Yisrael.
Start counting.
No, I know.
It's famous.
Yeah.
It's the Vav.
Darash, what was it?
No, the Darash is double words. But the middle letter is Kol Olech Al Gachon. So the Vav of Gachon is a large Vav. And the sages say that the reason that this is a large Vav, there's no reason for it to be large, is because it indicates that this is the middle of the entire Torah. So now if you go and you count, it's not. So leaving that aside a second, what do they want to say? It also is it also means something that in terms of being the middle.
Maybe by ink volume it is.
Maybe.
Letter number.
But what they want to say is that the whole purpose of Torah's Moshe, the whole purpose of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu gave, is in the center of it is to fix the Gachon, the whole Kol Olech Al Gachon. Who's the one who goes on Gachon? The Nachash. Kol Olech Al Gachon refers to the Nachash. It says the whole purpose of Moshe Rabbeinu in giving the Torah was to fix the Nachash. So Moshe Rabbeinu can add a tet into the second Luchos. But we can't, like Hashem didn't, because if He would have done it, there would have been the end of all service. It would have been the end of history, the end of everything. Everything would have been rectified at that moment, and that's it. And that's not why He gave the Torah. He wanted to give us Sachar. So Lamani Tavlach is the Sachar for doing what. So in any case, so there's a small discrepancy, just in terms of even the letters, that it's not the same letters. It's mostly the same. But says the Wakach, that little difference, that by itself, that little difference is how Bereshis is different than Matan Torah. And that if Hashem would have put the Samach in there, that would have been the end of nature. There would have been no way to realize that Hashem is behind nature, because everything would be perfectly round. So we talked about this in terms of astronomy, that like at least Josephus, the way he explains how did Avram, everybody has theories about how to understand what happened with Avram. How did Avram suddenly? So this Josephus's theory, I think it fits very well with what the Chachamim describe. That he came to the conclusion that the retrograde motion of the planets, the fact that it's not completely round, tells you that somebody else is running the show. Whereas the what do you call what's his name? Talmai, the guy who wrote the Almagest. I can't remember how you say it in English. Talmai is how you say it in Hebrew. I don't remember what his name is right now in Greek. And the Greeks, when they realized that there was retrograde motion and you have to account for it, that the planets can go forward and then they go back in the night sky, and then they go forward and they go back again. It's all because we say today because they're not circling the earth, they're circling the sun. So from our point of view, from our perspective, it looks like they're going backwards sometimes. But for them that was impossible. They had to be circling the earth. So their explanation was to add more circles called epicycles. And the epicycles were perfectly round. But already back then they understood that it doesn't work. And the Rambam said that it doesn't work really. It's not a glad explanation, because it doesn't exactly predict what the planets are going to look like in the night sky. Even when you add epicycles, you can see a movie on this, about this on YouTube, They have all kinds of simulations of what epicycles would make the planetary motion look like. It's close, but it's not exactly. Because you can't, again, the moment that you take them out and you say they're circling the sun, they're not circling the earth, theoretically it becomes more simple. But it doesn't really become more simple. Why? Because their motion is not circular.
Three-dimensional.
It's in 3 dimensions, and it's more elliptical than it is circular. And an ellipse is not far from being a circle, but it's not even a perfect ellipse. It's not like the two foci are exactly the same. A perfect ellipse, there's a certain relationship between the foci and the. So and in general, it shifts all the time. So all these small shifts, which leave you mathematically bewildered, you can't explain it. So the person can either say, okay, so I don't know the laws, but we can fudge them close enough as much as we want. Or you can say that something else is holding all this together. So in any case, so that there's no samech in Maaseh Bereshit, in the workings of creation, the whole description of creation is a big deal, that it's not perfectly according to the laws. You can't define perfect laws. Okay? So that is one small difference. There's also a lot more things that can be said about it. But here you have this. This is stressed here by the word sus. There's not very many words in Hebrew that have 2 samachs in them. A few, but not many. Okay? Like sasgon, sasgona, which is from Aramaic actually. It's a translation of tachash. There's not very many words in samach.
From an abstract perspective, the circle line circle is almost like is
right.
like
Sus is like a circle.
Sovev hamshacha sovev.
Right.
You know?
It's trying to stress to you that look for the straight line, meaning look for what is not innate. There's no straight lines in nature. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is that all motion in nature has to be circular. It has to be round. And if there's something moving in a straight line, you've got a problem. It's very hard to explain it using physics. Okay, so maybe we'll end here. We have tomorrow to Bezrat Hashem finish.
Finish it up.
That's right.